So I know I might actually be a little bit behind in talking about this, but honestly that's kind of my thing. I didn't discover My Chemical Romance until 2020, so I'm always a little bit behind. And another reason I like to kind of be behind on trends and what a lot of the internet is talking about is because I like to wait to see what everyone has already said versus what, you know, I think should be said, I guess is a way to put it. Mouthwashing has kind of been going out of people talking about it more than I'm seeing new videos coming out about it. And I just think it's pretty interesting what people are talking about versus what they're not talking about. I think very early on, people were almost not mentioning at all, I think, the biggest aspect of this game. But even still, I think it's very interesting that at first, a lot of people were talking about whether or not Curly is a good guy and kind of focusing a lot on Curly and not necessarily on Anya, when Anya is very clearly what the story is about. But I want to take that a step further. What Jimmy did to Anya is absolutely the catalyst of everything that happened in the story. And even though Jimmy is very technically the protagonist simply by being the main character, Anya is the story. A lot of people just straight up didn't even mention what happened to Anya at first when videos started coming out, which is wild to me. And even though that kind of aspect has changed, I've seen a lot of videos not only bring it up, but very clearly talk about how that is the story. I kind of want to take it one step further. I think people are forgetting about how the rest of the crew factors in. One of the main questions that I've seen posed a lot is Curly even a good guy? And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the permission of violence and how I think that is the main story going on here. How even though you yourself are a good person and a good guy, that is not enough. You will not stop a tragedy by simply being good. I'm assuming everyone who's watching this video has played or watched somebody play Mouthwashing, so I'm not gonna cover the story very much, but I do want to talk very heavily about the opening scene. When you are watching or reading or listening to a story, the opening scene is the thesis, right? What is this about? The opening of Jurassic Park very clearly shows that this is a kind of Frankenstein story talking about the hubris of man thinking he can create life and how that then turns back and destroys man. In the art of storytelling, you want your story to already be known in the first scene of whatever you're doing. In Mouthwashing, the very first thing that happens is while Jimmy is crashing the ship, taking away everyone on board's agency to make their own choices in order to fulfill what he wants, the very first scene of Mouthwashing is Jimmy crashing the ship. He is taking away everyone else's agency to fulfill what he desires, what he wants, what he thinks will be best to him, at an insane detriment to everyone around him. Does that sound pretty familiar? Jimmy commits a very blatant act of violence against people who considered him maybe not a friend, but at least a very close co-worker. I do think some of them probably considered him a friend, probably not Anya at this point. He makes the choice that everyone needs to die because of something he wants, because of something that'll help him. Even though we don't know this character is Jimmy, we already know that this person is taking away people's choice. Now, because we're playing this character and most people see themselves as good people, we assume there has to be a good reason. Why would somebody do this? More importantly, why would I do this? Oh, it's because I'm carrying something deadly on this ship. We just cannot. I have to sacrifice myself and all of these people in order to save a greater population of other people. Maybe I'm transporting a massive weapons that's going to be used to commit a slaughter. Maybe I'm transporting a horrible beast that, again, is going to kill a bunch of people. It's a trolley problem, basically. Then we learn later on in the story that they're transporting mouthwash. So that wasn't why we crashed the ship. It turns out it wasn't really a trolley problem. Whoever we were playing in that first scene made an incredibly selfish choice with no justification, it feels like. Things are a lot more confusing. And it cannot be understated how deliberate the act is. To have to go into the captain's locker in the cockpit and specifically get out a key to double down on what Jimmy is doing. And I think it's very telling that whenever you watch somebody play this game, you know, typically a YouTuber, because of course, they're very confused. They assume they made a mistake. Oh, I thought I was supposed to go that direction. I don't understand why it didn't give me an option to not do that. Like I thought I was helping. Again, seeing yourself as a person who makes good choices, good decisions, and doesn't try and randomly kill a bunch of people, it's hard to come to terms with the fact that in that instance, you are playing somebody who deliberately made that choice. What is more is that wasn't even Jimmy's choice to make. Jimmy was not the captain. No matter how badly he wants to be, he was not in charge. The themes of taking away someone else's agency, committing extreme acts of violence, and seeing everyone around him as expendable are so very clear from the opening of this game. The through line of "I hope this hurts" is very interesting to me, and I honestly don't see it touched on very much. It's very unclear who is saying this. It's hard to say it's Jimmy, because I think it's very clear he does not care about the people around him. He sees Anya as strictly an object, is incredibly dismissive of absolutely everything she says, and he clearly assumes she is beneath him. He obviously doesn't care about Swansea, since he's perfectly okay with assuming the worst as soon as possible, and he's perfectly fine putting Daisuke's life and body on the line in order to get his own achievement, to get what he wants done. And here again we have that theme of using somebody else's body for your own personal gain, getting what you want, assuming anybody who doesn't have the same goal at you is immediately an enemy. It can be said, however, that it's pretty clear that Jimmy is struggling with something. Maybe he wants so badly to feel pain in himself. That's what it's referring to. I hope this hurts, as in he really wants to feel something. I don't like this theory. Then again, I'm really against giving Jimmy the benefit of the doubt in any situation, which is my own personal bias. So then the question is, who is this? Who is saying "I hope this hurts"? I kind of don't have a good answer for this. My best answer is maybe Curly. I think kind of realizing your best friend is a fucking monster will make you want revenge in a way without wanting to take it yourself. Hearing that one of your friends that you trusted enough to bring on board as your co-pilot has done some of the most despicable and disgusting things you can imagine, I don't know how I would respond to that. I don't know how anybody would respond to that. I don't think anybody has a plan for how they would respond to that. So maybe this is Curly going, if you're going to behave like a monster, I hope you get the ending a monster deserves. Again, I don't know for sure, that's my best guess. But now we've kind of circled back around to my main point. I feel like with this opening scene of Jimmy crashing the ship, paired incredibly nicely with the weird hallucination of him seeing Polly get more and more distorted and the sound of a baby crying, like, if you haven't caught it at this point, Polly is the embodiment of the unborn child that Anya is carrying. What Jimmy is feeling the most guilt about and what his sins are strictly with what he's done to Anya. And to be honest, with a guy like Jimmy and the way he behaves in the rest of the game, I'm not even sure he feels guilty about it as much as like, oh shit, my life is over. Less guilty, more afraid, which pisses me off. But I do think that is more closely resembling what's going on, because Polly is not guilt tripping him, he is terrorizing him. So we understand in the opening scene, this game is about the violence Jimmy has done to mostly Anya, but pretty much the entire crew. This is who Jimmy is. Jimmy is a monster. This is what he's done. But also this theme of like, how did this happen? Who let this happen? And that might be a strange thing to say, and honestly, I don't believe people let things like this happen. Now, there are obviously circumstances where that does happen, where people do know exactly what's going on and let it continue for their own personal gain, their own personal enjoyment, or not seeing the victim as a person. There are absolutely horrible cases about people profiting from this kind of thing. The topic in this one is a heavy one, and there's a lot of real life situations that are just fucking terrible. That's the only word that can describe it. But we're playing a video game, not real life scenario. So naturally we're going to want to blame somebody. Obviously Jimmy is the most to blame. He is the one who committed these actions. He's the one who thinks he can treat people this way. But how did this happen in the first place? A lot of people question whether or not Curly is a good guy. I think Curly is a good guy in the same way most people are good people. It is not Curly's fault that Jimmy did what he did, but isn't it a little bit? The scene at the end of the game where Curly is talking to Jimmy directly before Jimmy decides to intentionally crash the ship, is such a stark contrast to how Jimmy had just spoken to Anya. Curly speaks to Anya in a very kind way. However, it is not comforting. It is a tad bit victim blamey in some points. Why didn't you tell me? What could I have done? She was telling him. It is very clear that she had told him multiple times what was happening. And it is fair to say that maybe she didn't directly say, hey, Jimmy's raping me, but she has told him that he's been being weirdly sexual with her. Bringing up sexual jokes out of nowhere when she was clearly uncomfortable, that's a red flag. I don't think that's the only time she said anything. She has mentioned that she's uncomfortable. She asks specifically why there aren't locks on the doors to her room. She craves that safety the medbay gives her. And Curly, in some way, is aware of what's going on. She says, I told you. She told him what was going on. Maybe it built up to the point where Jimmy assaulted her and got her pregnant. Maybe it had happened more than once. It doesn't matter. She did tell Curly, and Curly did not help. Curly and Jimmy are very good friends. They were friends back on Earth. In fact, Curly knows Jimmy has a history. We don't know what Jimmy's history is, except for the fact that we kind of get a glimpse of it, not only throughout the game, but in our opening scene. Violence, not caring about the people around him, and taking away everyone's agency. These are obvious red flags for somebody who's not your friend. It is easy to look at somebody who you do not know, watch them behave this way, and go, this guy is obviously a monster. When horrible things are trivialized down to jokes, it can also make it a little bit harder to spot the red flags. If you have a friend who jokes about violence often, it's very easy to write that off as, oh, it's just a joke, he just has like a dark sense of humor. Then when he actually goes and commits that violence, oh my god, who could have seen this coming? You could have seen that coming. In that scene with Curly and Anya, it's very clear to me that Curly wants so desperately to be a good guy. I think he tries his damn best. Sometimes your best isn't good enough, and that is a horrible fact. Curly and Anya were captain and medic. Curly and Jimmy are BFFs. And as I already stated earlier, thinking about how you would react if your best friend turned out to be a monster is almost impossible for anyone to imagine. I can sit here and criticize Curly because he's a fictional character. He talks to Anya in an almost corporate kind of way, like a boss talking to his employee. He doesn't exactly treat her as a friend, and that sucks, honestly. That scene honestly kind of hurt, especially when you pair it with him immediately going to talk to Jimmy and treating him like a friend. You have just learned that this person is a monster. What Anya has been afraid of for a long time came true, and you still go to him with this sense of, I still want to help you. I want you to get better. It kind of gives off this energy of, I will cover for you. We'll figure out how to get you off the hook for this. Almost downplaying Jimmy and his actions. He's almost trying to say that Jimmy should be treated the same way Brock Turner was. This was just a mistake. Think about this young man's full career. How could you do this to him? Again, this scene is very upsetting because it does happen in real life, like with Brock Turner. In this situation, Anya is becoming Chanel Miller and Jimmy is becoming Brock Turner. And Curly is the judge that only sentenced him to 6 months. We know what happened. Everyone knows what happened. But for some reason, Jimmy is still getting treated like a child, like a baby, like this was just some mistake. How could he have known this would change his life? Jimmy is a full-grown man who is in charge of his own choices. And yes, he and Curly were friends, but I do not think that that makes up for at all the way that Curly turns around after talking to Anya and almost blaming her, or at least putting some of the guilt on her, to turn around and try and offer Jimmy some sort of immunity, some sort of fixing the situation. You're my best friend, we can get through this. Jimmy single-handedly destroyed Anya's life, and then later on when he crashes the ship, he destroys everyone else's lives too. And yet here he is still being treated like somebody who is redeemable. And especially since this is a video game, that's just not true. He is not redeemable. people. And again, we see this theme of the permission of violence. Curly allowed this to happen. Is he responsible? Not fully, of course not. He was not the one doing these actions. However, he knew Jimmy had a past. He's seen these red flags before. Anya is coming to him saying, please help me, and he does nothing. His talk with Jimmy after Anya brings up her concerns has nothing to do with Anya. It's not, hey, fucking leave Anya alone, stop saying that weird gross shit to her. It's, hey buddy, how you doing? And yeah, if your friend is struggling, you do want to be there and be supportive of them. But at the same time, the fact that he just completely ignores everything that Anya said in this conversation is unacceptable from the standpoint of a boss having a talk with his employee and a friend having a conversation with another friend. Friends don't let other friends rape people. So yes, in these situations, Curly is being a good friend to Jimmy. That does not make him a good person. Being a good friend to Jimmy in this situation is being a bad person. Curly is clearly trying his best, but just because he is does not mean that what he's doing is correct. And yeah, this is a game where almost every single character is morally gray. The way Curly reacts, I do expect is the way most people would react. Again, a good person would not expect somebody that they consider a good friend to behave this way. A lot of people just laugh at jokes and don't take them very seriously because they would never behave that way. But just because you would never behave that way doesn't mean the friend making their jokes wouldn't. There's a very popular clip of a comedian that makes the rounds on TikTok and I don't know, probably other social media, but I'm not really on most social media. Daniel Sloss, in this comedy special of all things, brings up this conversation really nicely because he unfortunately had this happen to him. One of his friends turned out to be the same type of monster that Jimmy is.
I knew this man for 8 years and he fucking did it.
And it makes the rounds on social media, has gone viral because it's an important conversation and because men often don't talk about it and because it is honestly so refreshing to hear somebody admit mistakes they made.
Don't make the same mistake I did for years, which was just sitting back and be like, well, I'm not part of the problem, therefore I must be part of the solution, because that's just not how this fucking shit works. I believe and deep down I know that most men are good, or of course we are, but when 1 in 10 men are shit and the other 9 do nothing, they might as well not fucking be there.
And also admit that you can be a good person, a good man, and still make these mistakes and still accidentally keep the company of rapists. And in this section of his special, he specifically calls out the fact that there were red flags that he ignored because that's his friend.
Because if I'm being 100% honest with myself, were there signs in my friend's behavior over the years towards women that I ignored? The answer is yes. And that's on me until the day I die.
And you have to have some sort of trust in your friends, otherwise they're not your friends. And he talks about the guilt he lives with now, knowing that there was something he could have done. That just by not being a rapist himself, that is not enough. By standing by and doing absolutely nothing, by saying nothing every time somebody says something disgusting, by acting like you didn't hear it, it is giving the people who will do those things permission. Not explicit given permission, but social permission. Because they've told you what they want to do and you acted like it was fine. It is very clear that the culture, especially American culture right now, has this whole ideology of this happens, deal with it. Learn to deal with it. All of this culture surrounding me and most people in America right now is this permission of violence. Violence most likely will happen to you. Figure it out. You're on your own. Nobody wants to do anything about it. It's just a fact of life. When this doesn't have to be a fact of life, and the fact that people are so accepting of it is frankly insane. But of course we're assuming this is the culture Curly grew up in, although I do think that the characters are supposed to be British, I think. Just some of their vocabulary feels that way. But when your whole life is taught to just laugh these things off and not take it seriously, when these very concerning, very clear red flags are raised, that permission of violence sneaks in again. Nothing is done about it, nothing is said. Anya has to suffer in silence, and even though Curly, in my opinion, is a good guy, Jimmy is still allowed to violate her under his watch. Anya even perfectly foreshadows the violence Jimmy will bring at the very end of the game, specifically hiding the gun from him because she knows who he is, much more so than Curly. And Curly also knows who Jimmy is, even if he's refusing to see it. And at the very end, when Jimmy finds that gun and does exactly what Anya warned Curly about and told him was going to happen, all Curly can do is laugh at the irony. Anya told him everything. Anya told Curly what was going to happen to her before it happened, even if she didn't say it explicitly. Anya told Curly what was going to happen to everyone on that ship without saying it explicitly. So at the end, we just see Curly laughing. Pony Express likes to call itself a family. That's just mostly corporate jargon to force your coworkers to be friends. But I do like this kind of idea that Jimmy is a family annihilator. And I do think that if Jimmy ever did have a family, that's what he would be. He can't stand embarrassment on his own name. He can't stand the idea that he made a mistake or live with what he's done. He can't stand the idea of people being free of his torment and constant control. So he kills them all. And that, to me, is just a family annihilator. And Jimmy got to do these things and was able to commit all of these heinous acts despite someone coming forward and almost directly spelling out what would happen. If this person is so afraid that they have to hide weapons on board because they are fearing for their life, I don't understand why that wasn't taken more seriously. Simply saying, oh, he would never do that, he's my friend, is not enough. Curly might be a good guy. From what we see of him in this video game, he certainly doesn't act like it. But even just being a good guy is not enough. The thing is, being a good guy doesn't stop at not committing heinous acts yourself. You have to stop other people. It's not easy. It can make relationships really uncomfortable and really awkward. But in all honesty, why would you want to be friends with somebody who would do this anyway? Society has treated people like Anya incredibly unfairly. Watching people play this game, calling Anya a bitch, just never sat right with me. Sitting here calling her annoying and a bitch until the reveal feels, again, like that good guy stance of, oh, I'm just making jokes. Oh, this isn't actually violent. Oh, it's just, I'm annoyed by her. What are you annoyed with exactly? I mean that fully seriously. After the reveal, of course, we find out that the way she talks to and tries so hard to prop up Jimmy is a way to try and protect herself. But even before that reveal, what about her was a bitch? I don't understand that take at all. I also don't understand how anybody found Jimmy intriguing or like a role model. He was downright mean and nasty since we heard him talk. In fact, I didn't think I was gonna like this game at all after the first few opening scenes because I really disliked the way Jimmy spoke to his coworkers, even if he was the captain, and I can't stand a main character that treats people that way. So Jimmy being revealed to be the villain is honestly the only acceptable explanation for how he was talking to people, in my opinion. So even the way people reacted to the first half of this game shows this kind of idea of it's okay to talk to women very rudely and ignore them and completely shut down all their ideas. And it's completely okay to be an honestly, frankly, nasty man. And after the reveal, suddenly people's tune changes. Oh, Jimmy's a monster. All my friends hate Jimmy. Swansea's our number one. I don't know. It's just weird to see in real time the same switch up that Curly had. The way Jimmy talks to people is okay. Anya's crazy. And then all of a sudden too, shit, we should have taken Anya more seriously. This has been an interesting concept I've thought about ever since I saw the first person play this game. And so it's really interesting to me that nobody's kind of brought up this idea of the permission of violence, especially with such very clear examples of Curly walking up to Jimmy and basically being like, I will let you get away with this. So I want to talk about it. But that's going to be it from me for this video. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion. There are so many other think pieces and commentary videos and video essays about mouthwashing, and I honestly love them. I love to sit there and listen to a 3-hour long mouthwashing video. I just wanted to touch on this one little aspect that I feel a lot of people are missing or skipping over or not noticing. I'm not sure. I just haven't seen a lot of videos about this part of it specifically. But that's going to be it from me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.